The story.
One day, she was leaving work, and I'm like, "Good night, Rosie." And she said, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you." And I said, "Wow." And she goes, "I want you to know something else. I love you." And those words broke through the hardness of my heart like nothing else could. And I began to weep. I cried, and I hid my head under a counter because I didn't want her to see me crying. I didn't even know why I was crying, really. But something touched me so deeply, and I thought, I don't know what she's got, but I have to have it.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, before we begin, I just want to let parents know that due to the subject being discussed today regarding sexuality and sexual identity, today's program is not recommended for young listeners. As we'll hear, Tom grew up in the United States and struggled with his identity and same-sex attraction. Meanwhile, Donna grew up in a highly dysfunctional home and also struggled with same-sex attraction. They've now been married for over 30 years and have 4 adult children, with one married and living here in Australia. We'll hear Tom and Donna Cole share their unique story today as they have a chat with Eric Scatterbo in our Melbourne studios.
Tom and Donna, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for
So
having
good
us.
to be here.
Glad to have you with us. And one of the reasons why you're even here in Australia is you're visiting your son who lives on the east side of Melbourne.
Yep.
Yes.
He actually was, we were all missionaries, and he was a missionary and met an Aussie girl, and they fell in love and were married, and they were missionaries in Amsterdam for 2 years, and then they ended up moving back to her family here in Melbourne.
And that's so wonderful because it's right here on the east side of Melbourne, near the studio. So he brought you over here today.
Yeah, we were only 10 minutes away.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And I should say you're originally from where in the United States?
Michigan, Detroit area of Michigan, originally. Both of us grew up
Yes.
there.
Both of us.
Okay. And now you're currently living in North Carolina?
South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina.
I was close.
Yep, you're close. We're neighbors.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, and as we heard in the introduction, both of you struggled with same-sex attraction in your teen years growing up. So we'll start with you, Tom. Please share with us, what was your life like growing up?
So I always say I grew up in just a real typical all-American dysfunctional family. So it wasn't dramatic. You'll hear Donna's story, very much more dramatic, violent home, things like that. It wasn't like that. It was a quiet dysfunction. My father was an alcoholic, son of an alcoholic. So there were just, things that you didn't talk about. And you learn in alcoholic homes not to mention those kind of things. So it was just a very quiet dysfunction. I was the third son and hoped for daughter in a family of 6. So my mom...
they wanted you to be a daughter.
Oh, yeah. My mom told me growing up all the time, if I would have been a girl, my name would have been Debbie. So I knew that from a very early age, and it didn't help that I had big brown eyes with rosy cheeks and long eyelashes, So my mom would say, you would have made a pretty girl. And actually, other women would say, neighbors, and, you would make such a pretty girl. So that doesn't solidify in a young boy growing up a strong masculine image. So, yeah. So I was very aware of that my mom was slightly disappointed that I wasn't a girl. She didn't have a name picked out for me. And I was a very emotional little boy. So I cried all the time. And my dad's kind of a man's man, very stoic, didn't really show a lot of emotion. He was a Korean War vet. His father was a World War I vet. So they were pretty stoic and unemotional. And I was so emotional. I cried when I was happy. I cried when I was sad. And really...
commercials, did you?
Yeah, commercials. I remember Born Free, the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Elsa the Lion.
Yeah.
And I was just a little boy, and I'm sitting there watching it, tears just pouring down my face and realizing nobody else in the room was crying. So, you just feel kind of out of place. And I didn't fit in with the other boys.
They weren't crying at Born Free.
They weren't crying at Born Free, and I was. I also remember we went to a resale shop, and I was probably 4 years old, and I really wanted a doll, and I remember my dad getting very angry. He will not get a doll. He was very, certain of that, and I didn't get the doll.
He wanted to give you a hammer.
Or a truck or something like that. But no, he was very upset about that, and I remember that. And so it was a sense that I was a disappointment to him.
And what was your relationship like with your father in general?
In general, there wasn't much of one. I feared him because he would get very frustrated. He was gone a lot. He worked. And then when he was home, he was very much not emotionally connected. Like I have very strong memories of childhood. I remember my house when I was 2 years old. So I have clear memories, and I don't remember hugging me, kissing me, telling me he loved me. Mostly I remember he corrected us. It was kind of, back then, wait till your father gets home. The dad was the disciplinarian. So I viewed my father that way, that he was the disciplinarian.
And your relationship with your mother?
She was very protective, overprotective with me, I would say, because I was very emotional and sensitive, kind of the smothering mother, you could kind of say. She was very tender, and I remember lots of love from her, nurture, hugs and kisses, those kind of things. But there was that sense of overprotecting me.
Okay, and then when you entered your teen years, when all the other boys were starting to get interested in girls?
Yeah, I found that I was not. In fact, I remember Charlie's Angels was a really big thing in the U.S. back
70s,
then. And Farrah Fawcett was the heartthrob of every little boy. And we had a poster in our room. I shared a room with 3 other brothers, and a poster of Farrah Fawcett. And I looked at it and goes, that's not doing it for me. In fact, James Caan was really big back then too, and I found myself attracted to the posters of James Caan, and I thought, oh no, something's terribly wrong. I attributed back then, I had been sexually abused at the age of 4 and then again at the age of 8 by older boys. One was an 18-year-old. And so I believe that helped solidify the confusion in my life. But as I entered into puberty, I was very aware that I wasn't attracted to girls or women. I was attracted actually to men. It wasn't boys my own age. It was more men in Hollywood and men out and about. So at the age of 13, I entered into a physical relationship with another boy in our neighborhood, and we were active together for the next 6 years. So it wasn't a romantic relationship by any means, but it was the 70s. There were no gay clubs back then in high school. I said the only club was a baseball bat, and they would beat you with it if they found out that you were gay. So everyone was closeted in high school. So I very much stayed hidden and as invisible as possible so that I wouldn't get beat up or harassed. Then I went to college, and at 19, met my first openly gay person in a vocal jazz singing group that I was in. And he introduced me to the gay life in Detroit, the gay community. And I jumped in with both feet. I said, this is who I am. They told me I was born that way. It felt that way to me because I felt different from as far back as I could think. And I jumped in, and I didn't have any kind of moral principle to keep me from doing that. I wasn't.
I was going to say,
yeah.
Were you raised a certain way?
No. My mom was Catholic, nominal Catholic, as many people in the North were at that time. But we really weren't raised in the church. My father was an atheist and very clear that he didn't believe in God, and very humanistic in his mindset. And so I kind of adopted his mindset, and I really felt like there really wasn't a God, that it was all kind of a cosmic accident. So as I entered more into the gay world and the gay life, I was very active in the gay community. I began to feel very empty, and it felt shallow to me. I thought this would finally fulfill that deep longing in my heart, and it didn't.
So here you thought, finally, I'm finding people who I can identify with. I'm home.
Yeah.
But yet, it didn't satisfy.
No, I still felt incredibly empty. And so I started looking into Buddhism and Hinduism and New Age thinking. I was doing transcendental meditation and astral projection, all this kind of New Agey stuff. And I believe really I was in a seeking place. I really was seeking for that something more. You know, Scripture says he's placed eternity in men's hearts. And I believed I knew that there was something more, and I was looking for it. So that's why I love all the New Age hippie people, because I really do think many of them are seeking just as I was, you know. And but it didn't, again, satisfy the deep longing of my heart. At that time, I worked at a restaurant that was like a chain of restaurants. And I ended up going to work at the one that nobody wanted to work at. And there was a woman there named Rosie. She was a waitress. I was a cook. And in that world, cooks hate waitresses. Waitresses hate cooks. Yeah, that's just the way it is. There's a kind of mutual animosity between the two. But all the cooks like Rosie because she was the kindest, sweetest lady. She was very wonderful. It was in a very predominantly Italian Catholic area, and so she was short and kind of olive complected, so I just assumed she was a Christian. So I assumed she was Italian and Catholic. Turns out she was Lebanese and Pentecostal. So
You're just off a little bit there.
Off a little bit. And she would say strange things like, praise the Lord. And
you had never heard anybody
never heard that kind of stuff. I didn't really, I was a waiter as well as a cook at this restaurant. And
wow. So did you not like yourself?
Yeah, exactly. But I did like Christians. I did not like them because they were kind of demanding and left lousy tips with tracts that told you were going to hell.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I wasn't a fan, but there was something different about Rosie, and it was that kindness. Looking back on it, I realized then I was a homosexual, partying, vulgar-mouthed, new agey, strange guy. Yet she never pointed out my sin. She always just loved on me. And I didn't realize that until much later, like maybe a year later after I ended up becoming a Christian, I realized she never once pointed out my sin. She just showed me love.
And talked about Jesus.
Yeah, she did. She shared Christ very much so. And so I was drawn to her. And then one day, she was leaving work, and I'm like, good night, Rosie. And she said, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And I thought that was very odd since she didn't really know me. And I said, you pray for me? And she said, I pray for you every night. My husband and I pray for you. And I said, wow. And she goes, I want you to know something else. I love you. And those words broke through the hardness of my heart like nothing else could. And I began to weep. I cried, and I hid my head under a counter because I didn't want her to see me crying. I didn't even know why I was crying, really. But something touched me so deeply, and I thought, I don't know what she's got, but I have to have it.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo was chatting with Tom and Donna Cole, who are sharing their life journeys. So far, we've been mostly hearing from Tom, who's been telling us about his background and his struggles with his identity and same-sex attraction. Next, we'll hear how Tom becomes a Christian, and then it's Donna's turn to share her background. All that and more when we return.